Welcome everyone to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 12 of the 2022 podcast series where we take a look at the draft eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft set to begin April 2022, Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'll tell you what, last podcast we were wrapping up the month of October, moving into November, and I said at the time, if September and October were any indication of what to expect in November, we were in for a treat, and man, we'll be right there. Michigan, Ohio State really put a nice close to the month of November. Watching Michigan and Jim Harbaugh finally get that win over Ohio State. Aidan Hutchinson, a dominant performance, that 3-sack performance really elevates his status into that top 5. Any question about his game now, he's been able to showcase some speed along with that power, using that length to his advantage. That inside swim move was lethal. Ran over Thayer Munford as well. Definitely a top 5 candidate. Keep an eye on him. Could potentially go in the top 3. Texans sitting there at number 2 right now. They're going to look for another J.J. Watt. Could Aidan Hutchinson be that guy? We'll have to wait and see and find out there. But it wasn't just on the field that the fireworks at the end of November, right? We saw the coaching carousel really pick up steam. Mel Tucker really was the first domino to fall there with Michigan State, that $96 million contract to stay put there with Sparty in East Lansing. And that really got the other teams looking, what can we do? Lincoln Riley seemed to be happy there at Oklahoma, has now moved to USC, $110 million contract. They're buying out his homes in Norman, $500,000 above what the asking is. He's getting $6 million to buy a home in LA. And he also gets to fly the private jet, really access 24/7 for his family. Just a day later, LSU says, hold our beer, we're going to go ahead and go after Notre Dame's Brian Kelly. Now look, with Lincoln Riley, they weren't moving on to the college football playoff. They lost in Bedlam to Oklahoma State. But Brian Kelly, Notre Dame is right in the thick of things. They have a chance to go on to the playoff. They're right there. And somehow LSU was able to pry Brian Kelly away. And I'm telling you, when we look at what the actual figures are, because they're going to make that formal announcement, I believe, tomorrow, they're really rolling out the welcome wagon. If you see what Michigan State and USC have done, just expect LSU to put something out there that's going to blow our minds as well. So the coaching carousel, it's really crazy, really what to expect. And that's one of the things that you look at really with the NFL head coaches. For a long time, it was said that everybody, the destination was the NFL. Because you don't have to deal with recruiting, you're dealing with the adults. This is the premier professional league. But you got NIL with all of the students now, the players, they have the NIL endorsements and everything. This is really the big market with college football. You don't have to answer to an owner, really at this point, as the head coach, especially with the money that they're throwing at these guys right now. You've got really the AD at your beck and call. So could there was talk that Cliff Kingsbury could potentially be an option there at OU. Could we start seeing some of these coaches decide to move in the other direction from the NFL to the college ranks? It's going to be interesting to see what type of dynamic. Do we actually see college head coaches move on to the NFL, given what these boosters and these schools are looking to offer? And so we'll make the segue to the NFL draft now. And I think for myself, the last few weeks, I've had some personal matters that I've had to deal with, so I haven't been able to record a podcast over the last few weeks, but I'm dedicated to making sure that I bring quality content each and every week going forward. So even though I wasn't able to record a podcast, I made sure that I was watching as many games as possible and making sure that I'm not missing out on any action. So end of November into December, we're talking about conference championships and bowl games. Who are going to be the guys that we're going to watch in the bowl games? I'll be putting together a bowl special once the bowls have been announced. And I think really the next podcast that I want to put together is really going over some of the sleepers, the guys that are flying under the radar right now, those names that really you want to make sure that you are if you haven't gotten a chance to see him yet, find some tape on him. Make sure that you tune into any of the bowl games as well, because there are some names out there that we really should be talking about in that 3rd, 4th, 5th round. That's where a lot of guys, they make their money, is really looking at those picks. End of day 2, beginning, middle of day 3. You look at the Rams and what they were able to do, even without all the first-round picks. Just think about it. Cooper Kupp, just one example of a 3rd-round pick, and you see what he's doing in the NFL now. So we're going to actually take a look at the top players in the draft in this podcast. So we're going to go each position real quick. Who's at the top at each position? Who are the next guys in line after that? And where are they currently expected to come off the board? Look, a lot can change and will change throughout the draft process, especially as we get into 2022. Where do they stand right now? So when we look at the quarterback position, obviously you've got a few guys there at the top, and this is a draft class that's not, it's underwhelming in comparison to past years, right? You're talking about last season really being unprecedented. 5 quarterbacks taken in the first 15 picks. I don't know when we're going to see that happen again, but at the top of my list is Matt Corral out of Ole Miss. 6'1", 205, career 67.5% passer, over 8,000 yards, 57 touchdowns, just 22 interceptions. 14 of those were thrown last year. And look, I've talked about it from day one that this is a guy that I thought if he could really take the pieces from 2020 and eliminate the mistakes, this guy could really be a player. And we've seen that with Lane Kiffin. 20 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions, also able to do it on the ground. Look, career over 1,300 yards on the ground, 4 yards per carry, 18 touchdowns, including 11 this year. And look, the defense struggled at times for Ole Miss, and at the end of the day, I think Matt Corral is definitely deserving of going to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, but I just don't think that he has enough there, especially with Ole Miss losing down the stretch. But this is a guy, you see the football acumen. This is a guy who works tirelessly, and the game study, you watch him with his eyes. That's one of the things that I love. You saw that against Texas A&M. Eyes staying to the right, keeping the safety towards the middle of the field, snaps the head to the left, balls out, finds Dontario Drummond on a skinny post, puts the ball right out in front of him, allowing the receiver to make the catch in stride. This guy with the ball placement throws his receivers open. I really love the ball placement. He changes his arm angles and is able to take something off. So he's not just throwing a fastball. He has that touch as well. To me, Matt Corral is your top guy. He's one of those mobile quarterbacks too. That's really where we're going with the game. This is a guy who can, off-platform throws, make all those throws on the run, and a guy when he does vacate the pocket, those eyes still stay down the field, but if nothing's open, he's not afraid to take off and run, and when he does that, he's able to pick up yards in bunches. I'm a big fan of Matt Corral, and he's number 1 overall for me in terms of the quarterbacks. Where's he going to come off the board? There are enough teams that are looking for a quarterback to where he could slide into the top 10. I think really, you're probably talking about in the teens, maybe even early 20s is where this quarterback class should come off the board. But I think he'll probably end up sliding into the top 10 when it's all said and done. Number 2 on my list is Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh. This was a guy who made a great decision coming back to school. And look, over 12,000 yards as the quarterback there for the Pitt Panthers. Over 4,000 yards this year, just a tad under 68%. 40 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And look, I've been hard on some of the comparisons to Joe Burrow. It's like, well, he really, decided he'd come back for one more year there at Pitt, and like Joe Burrow, that final year really blew up, really elevated his game to the next level, and it's not really on par with what Joe Burrow was able to do, obviously, in Joe Brady's offense. But you see the level of confidence that he has, especially with his receivers in Jordan Addison, and Jared Wayne, and the running back Abanikanda. Melky Stovall as well. He's just an intelligent quarterback. He's an all-time leading passer there at Pitt. And a guy who he knows, he takes what the defense gives him. He understands who he is, doesn't try to do too much. The ball placement is excellent. The decision making as well. And this guy's tough, man. He's going to be a guy that's going to, when things aren't there, he'll pull the ball, and he's, unlike Matt Corral, who's a little bit more shifty, Kenny Pickett's going to try to run you over. He's going to lower his shoulder, and he's going to try to pick up some of those tough yards, and he's really a lot of fun to watch. You watch him on the back shoulders, puts the ball right where only his receiver can make a play. You watch him on Jordan Addison time and time again on post, puts the ball right over the shoulder, allowing him to make the catch, not have to break stride, and take off as well. You watch the ball placement again, and really being able to fit the ball into a tight window. Those are the things that you're looking for as a quarterback. Anybody can sit there and throw it to a wide open receiver on a go route, but can you throw a guy open? Can you fit the ball into a tight window where only your guy can make a play? Kenny Pickett does it better than just about anybody in this draft class. Number 3 on the list is going to be Malik Willis. Now, I think Malik Willis may get drafted ahead of Kenny Pickett, and I think really it's more because of the traits. You look at Malik Willis, and this is a guy who has tremendous arm strength, just a flick of the wrist, and the ball just flies off of his hands 50, 60 yards down the field, effortless with the delivery, right? The problem is you watch the footwork. Footwork isn't always there. He tries to really aim the ball more so than trying to really throw it. That gets him into trouble as well. And look, just a 2-year starter there at Liberty, just under 5,000 yards passing, 45 touchdowns, 18 interceptions, has 12 interceptions this year. Really kind of struggled at times with some of his accuracy and got himself into trouble a little bit there, but definitely dynamic as a runner. And I think that's what makes everything so exciting about him. Over 2,000 yards on the ground in his career, 1,764 yards at Liberty with 25 touchdowns, 5.3 yards per carry for the Flames. And I look at Malik Willis, to me, I think he'd be maybe a low first rounder, maybe early second round. But I do think that when you're talking about so many teams that are looking for quarterbacks right now, you're talking about Detroit possibly with Jared Goff. You're talking about the Houston Texans, what's going on with Deshaun Watson, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think they're going to be happy with Mason Rudolph. They're going to need a quarterback. Washington, Taylor Heineke, are you happy there? I think you're going to need to get another quarterback in there. Even if Ryan Fitzpatrick comes back, he's really your stopgap QB. Carolina, is Cam Newton going to be your long-term answer? We know that Sam Darnold isn't. I think the Panthers start thinking about a quarterback. And what about the Giants? Daniel Jones. It's one of those things to where Daniel Jones may not be the answer in New York either. So a lot of teams that have to be looking at that quarterback position. Also, what happens with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers? Are they going to be on those rosters? Where did they go? That could influence where teams may end up needing quarterbacks. What happens with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater there in Denver? Are either of them really the answer for the Broncos? I think again, a lot of teams are going to have to make a decision. Even the Saints, Jameis Winston, the knee injury. Taysom Hill really has that unique contract of his, but he's not going to be the quarterback. He's not going to be that franchise quarterback. They're going to utilize him in a lot of different ways, but I just don't see him being that starter. So if Jameis Winston, if there are any concerns about that knee, the Saints could end up jumping into the mix as well. So with all those teams, you're going to have at least 3 quarterbacks taken. And I think with Malik Willis, I think the athleticism, the traits, the higher ceiling is going to end up putting him into conversation, probably in the teens and maybe the early 20s. I think Kenny Pickett is going to be more NFL ready right now. And so I think some of those teams that maybe it's a Pittsburgh that keeps the kid in state. And, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Just a kid who, he's a blue-collar type of kid, blue-collar type of city. It just seems like a natural fit. Depending on where Pittsburgh is on the board, there may be teams that decide to trade back into round number 1. We've seen teams do that. We saw the Ravens sneak into the end of round 1, take Lamar Jackson just a few years ago. So those are the quarterbacks there. After that, I think you're probably going to see Sam Howell out of North Carolina and Carson Strong from Nevada. Those are probably the next 2 quarterbacks, probably right there in the early second round range. If there's really a talk with the quarterbacks, you may see another one of those guys pop into round 1. There's a possibility, but I just don't see there being 5 quarterbacks taken in round 1 at this point. Carson Strong, Just the mobility, the lack of mobility is really concerning. And Sam Howell, just the decision making. This is a guy who has a tremendous arm to make all the throws, the athleticism as well. He's over 700 yards on the ground, has I think 300-yard games. So really a guy who could be a playmaker on the outside. But I think there's just too many question marks in his game for me to take him in the first 32 picks. Moving on to the running back position, and we don't have a first-round running back. And really the debate's going to be between Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall. And Kenneth Walker right now, I think, has the edge, the 5'10", 210-pounder, the transfer from Wake Forest, has more yards at Michigan State in one season with 1,646 than he did in his 2 years there at Wake Forest. 18 touchdowns as well, 6.2 yards per carry. Not really asked to catch the football out of the backfield very often. So I think that's one of the things that you want to watch with him catching the football in some of the workouts. Look, you can't knock Jonathan Taylor and some of these other guys. Once they get to the league, they're showing off their hands. So really, you just because they weren't used in the offense in the passing game doesn't mean they can't catch the football. So with Kenneth Walker, what you really have here is a physical runner, physical presence, but a guy who also has that home run speed. And what I love about him is he's patient, he has a tremendous vision, and his ability to hit those cutback lanes. And once he does that, the contact balance is ridiculous. He just runs through contact, more contact, yards after contact than any other running back this season. And so I think with Kenneth Walker, what you're looking at is the guy who's going to come off the board in round number 2. I think really what the question is he burst onto the scene there at Michigan State. Was it really a product of the system? What's going on there? Why wasn't he as successful there at Wake Forest? I think teams are going to kind of study the film a little bit, do some homework with Kenneth Walker. But I think he's definitely a guy that we're going to see come off the board early day 2. Look, Jonathan Taylor was a second-round pick, and you see what he's doing there for Indy. I think Kenneth Walker will be just fine. And then Breece Hall, look, 6th in the Heisman voting in 2020 there for the Iowa State Cyclones, over 1,500 yards, 21 touchdowns, 23 receptions on the year. Comes back 2021, and Iowa State, look, they have the 5 losses. They are struggling a little bit. But again, he's going to eclipse 1,500 yards again after the bowl game, 5.8 yards per carry, 20 touchdowns, and then 36 receptions. Now, I don't know if you were able to catch him in one of his recent games, but he made this one-handed catch that was absolutely ridiculous. So any questions about him catching the football, there are no questions because we see it time and time again, and that's one of the things that I think is so impressive about him is he's one of those guys that can do a little bit of everything. He can step up and protect Brock Purdy when he needs to. You see the lateral cuts to be able to bounce the football outside, the vision, decisiveness to hit the hole and get downhill in a hurry. You don't see a ton of wiggle, but he'll do enough to avoid defenders. But look, he runs through contact. Another guy with those missed tackles, the lower body strength, and that powerful leg drive as well, just running through guys. And the vision, against Baylor, is bottled up behind the line of scrimmage, puts his foot in the ground, reverses field there at the line of scrimmage, gets back up into the outside, even just for a 4-yard gain. He didn't panic. He has the vision, he sees daylight, and he's able to get there in a hurry. So I really am a fan of Breece Hall. I think he's your number 2 running back so far in this draft class. After that, you're talking about Kyren Williams there out of Notre Dame. Another guy who has tremendous hands, the versatility. This is the guy who definitely is a home run threat. Tremendous receiver. And then Isaiah Spiller there out of Texas A&M. He's a big, physical running back, a physical presence, especially between the tackles, and a guy who likes to bounce it to the outside. I don't think he has the home run speed maybe that Kyren Williams has, but definitely a guy who, when you're asking him to run the football between the tackles, definitely physical, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He would have had 3, but he just came up 54 yards short as a freshman in 2019. And when you look at the receptions, look, 74 receptions out of the backfield, just 7.9 yards per reception, but still, a guy that was utilized in the passing game, very natural pass catcher as well. And when you talk about the running game there at Texas A&M, he shares the backfield a little bit with Devin Achane and Anais Smith. a little bit as well. So there's not quite as much wear there with his legs, and he's used to sharing the backfield, sharing the load. So I think the transition to the next level, we don't have to worry about that too much. When we talk about the receiver position, and we transition there, obviously the conversation, we had teammates from Alabama the last couple of drafts. We saw Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. We see Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. Now we have Ohio State with two guys, and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And I'll tell you what, Garrett Wilson right now to me is the guy. He's the number one wideout in this year's draft. This is a guy, is just so tremendous getting separation vertically. Can really, put pressure on that cornerback, and does a great job with those routes, stacking the receiver. When you watch him, doesn't run a ton of routes in the route tree necessarily, but definitely a guy who, when he looks to separate with his routes, he's going to put his foot in the ground, sink those hips, and is explosive coming out of those breaks. The body control is just absolutely ridiculous. A guy who's going to, when he gets up in the air, he's going to do whatever he can to come down with the football, contorts his body, making those excellent catches. And the thing with it too is he does a great job extending those arms and making the catch away from his body. You're really not going to see anyone get a hand in to make a play on the football. And you look at, like the game against Michigan State, at the 15-yard line, drives that defensive back, quick hard sell to the outside, then a jab and a head fake, crosses the face of the DB, and into the end zone. Ball is right on him there by C.J. Stroud for a 15-yard touchdown. So the suddenness is one of the things that you just absolutely love. He wins off the line on this crossing route against Michigan, makes the catch, then really difficult to bring down in the open field on one play. Then he goes in, drives Vincent Gray up the field, past the sticks, opens up to the inside to haul in the pass thrown on the outside, away from the corner. Just what I love, throttling down, working back down the stem to the quarterback, and going down and getting the football. So he's a guy who's willing to do the dirty work, in addition to being a playmaker and a high riser down the field. Garrett Wilson, 6 foot, 192 pounds. He's going to be the number one wideout in this year's draft class. And then after that, it's really kind of pick your poison. I think Jameson Williams right now is a guy who is really picking up steam. And this is a guy who's, he uses those long limbs to his advantage. Those levers to get separation from some of the defensive backs. That's one of the things that you really, really like to see from him. But this is a guy who just continues to get vertical on guys. And when you look at the Alabama receivers, that's one of the things that you always are talking about is guys getting vertical. And you saw that with Jerry Jeudy. You saw that with Henry Ruggs. You saw that with Jalen Waddle. You saw that with Devontae Smith. And now the same thing with Jameson Williams. And that's the thing that I think is so impressive with him is the ability to get vertical, driving his man, off the ball, and then showing those double moves. And being able to set up his man and, at that stem, really just a quick jab to the inside or out, really getting his man to open those hips, and then he's got him. Once the DB opens those hips, he's able to then change that speed and get down the field. Against LSU, ran right by Cameron Lewis from the slot. Wasn't rerouted, plants, cuts to the inside on the post, and of course Bryce Young, one of the guys who just does a tremendous job putting the ball on his receiver, able to haul it in without breaking stride for a 58-yard touchdown. That was his 10th catch of 20-plus yards. And a guy, then against Arkansas, gets vertical behind two defensive backs on a post down the middle of the field, catches the ball in stride over his shoulder for a 79-yard touchdown. That game, again, just going off, 32-yard touchdown, 2 steps, a stutter, and then cut to the inside after winning at the line of scrimmage, makes that catch on the slant, runs away from Ladarius Bishop, the corner, for that 32-yard score. A guy who can get open at the line of scrimmage, a guy that can push the field vertically. That speed you can't teach, especially for a guy 6'1", 189 with those long arms. I think Jameson Williams is a guy that at the end of the day is going to be the number 2 wide receiver coming off the board. So either of those guys, are they top 10 picks? I don't see either of these guys really being that difference maker that I'm going to take in the top 10. But when you're talking getting into the teens and 20s, we've got as many as 6-7 guys that can come off the board in round number 1. After these two, I mentioned Garrett Wilson had a teammate. And Chris Olave is definitely going to be that guy who's going to be in the mix to be that number 3 receiver. And what you love about Chris Olave is just how smooth he is. He and Garrett Wilson both, but Chris Olave is just so smooth. He excels at coming back to the football on comebacks. Just so smooth, being able to to sink those hips and drive back down the stem and being presentable to the quarterback to make a play, bailing out his quarterback whenever he needs to. Tremendous hands, the body control along the sideline. Some people think that his footwork's a little sloppy, and I'm really kind of surprised when I hear that, because this is a guy who I think is so smooth in and out of his breaks. He makes it look easy. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he just makes it look so easy and so smooth coming out of those breaks. He's still getting open. So, if the footwork's sloppy, then really, I don't know how he's, if he gets that cleaned up, in your eyes, then he's that much more dynamic of a receiver, I guess. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But Chris Olave, maybe not quite the sudden threat that Garrett Wilson is, but definitely a guy who has that footwork along the sideline, is going to be a guy that's going to do everything that you need. He's not afraid to go over the middle. You see him with those releases coming off the line, and I think that's what makes these 3 receivers so deadly and so lethal, is their ability with those releases off the line. They use a variety of different releases. You'll see a stutter, you'll see these jabs, and a variety of those moves coming off the line. And so I think that's one of the things that you really have to keep an eye out for with Chris Olave for sure. Now you get to the big receivers. And Treylon Burks out of Arkansas and Drake London from USC. Now with Treylon Burks, I think he's more of the vertical threat. And what I mean by that, this is a guy, he's about 18 yards per reception down the football field, and a guy who just, against Missouri, the last game that they played, split the safeties, getting vertical down the field on the skinny post, tracked the ball over his shoulder, does a great job using that 6'3", 225-pound frame to wall off defenders as well. Against Alabama, vertical up the sideline with Josh Jobe, good coverage, was even with him, able to box Josh Jobe out on this back shoulder throw, hauls it in for a 33-yard gain. He wins those 50-50 balls. Just a great job, utilizing that big body to his advantage, and then that body control, bending to the inside on some of these throws, and you'll see him eating up the cushion down the sideline over the top against some of the corners. And so he's a versatile wide receiver. He's one of those guys to where you get excited watching him play. Is he an Anquan Bolden type receiver? That's one of the things that you really have to start asking yourself when you watch Treylon Burks is what type of receiver is he? He's a little bit faster, I think, than Anquan Bolden, but he definitely has that similar size. And then with Drake London, I've heard Carson Palmer compare Drake London to Calvin Megatron Johnson, and I just don't see that he's quite there in terms of, obviously that's high praise for a pro football Hall of Famer, but I get what he's trying to say. With Drake London, what you have is a big physical freak. He's 6'5", 210 pounds, a guy who just attacks the football in the air. What I love about Drake London is everybody talks about the fact that he was a former basketball player, played for the USC basketball team. What you see, though, is he left basketball to focus full-time on football. This is his first year just playing football, and his ability to just take over games. Defenses knew what USC was going to do. They had to, because really what was happening was, whether it was Keaton Slovis or Jackson Dart, they were throwing the football to Drake London, and you'd see double-digit targets, double-digit receptions, over 100 yards every single game, and they couldn't stop it. It was one of those things to where you knew that he was getting the football, and yet he just couldn't stop the guy. Through 8 games, 88 catches, over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, before he broke his ankle there against Arizona. And I'll tell you, you watch him, and he's not just a big physical guy. I hear people talk about, well, maybe he's just an Alshon Jeffrey, a guy who's just going to high point football down the field, or maybe he's just a J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. A guy that's just going to get vertical. Look, he's not going to run the 40 time that J.J. Arcega-Whiteside posted. What you have with Drake London, to me, is more of a Mike Evans. And what I mean by that is this is a guy who, even though teams knew where they were going to go with the football, they knew that A&M was going to target Mike Evans, that Johnny Manziel was going to get him the football. It didn't matter because Mike Evans was still coming down with the football. Even when Johnny Manziel would just throw the football up, Mike Evans was coming down with the football. Now look, Mike Evans ran a 4.53 at the combine. I think that's about what Drake London's going to run. Now, I think he's going to run in that 4.53 range. Does that mean that he's going to be one of the first receivers taken? I think he'll probably end up coming off the board somewhere in the 20s, to be perfectly honest with you. What's going to be interesting is, with Lincoln Riley showing up at USC, does he think about coming back for one more year? He had 1,000 yards through 8 games and breaks his ankle. Now, obviously there's no guarantee. He's basically a first-round pick as it is, but he's got to battle a lot of other receivers. In the first year in the Lincoln Riley run offense, it's going to be awfully tempting for him. But look, he has nothing left to prove. He's a guy that I think could definitely be a first-round pick. And the route running is one of those things that I think he's still working on it. But you see the nuance with the route running. His ability to throttle down, and for a guy his size, 6'5", 210, 215, being able to throttle down and get in and out of his breaks. You don't really see any of that stiffness. You don't see him really struggle to come out of those breaks. He's very smooth, very fluid as a receiver. And so that's one of the things that really has me excited about Drake London at the next level. And then you have Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson, there may not be a more shifty and explosive receiver coming off the line than Jahan Dotson. A weapon there at Penn State, 5'11", 184 pounds, 91 catches, over 1,100 yards, and 12 touchdowns. A vertical threat, a guy who plays bigger than his size, a guy that's going to want to go up and high point the football, very sudden coming in and out of his breaks. This is a guy who is going to really juke you out when you're in the open field. What's I worry about him is he is just 184 pounds, and you already see him start to get rerouted. You see him getting pushed off of his line, and you get physical with him, and he struggles at times. It makes me worry if maybe he's a Jalen Reagor more so than a Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, even though he was very slight, that dude was still able to get open and make plays. And so that's really the thing when you look at Jahan Dotson, what's going to happen there. That's really going to be the big question. Then John Mechie really has stepped up and elevated his game. I thought that he's mostly a vertical threat. He's really surprised me. He's the guy who could sneak into round number 1. And then after that, you've got a lot of other receivers that are very talented. Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama is a guy to keep an eye on. When we talk about sleepers, he's definitely a guy that you're going to want to watch out for. So moving on to the tight ends. And when we talk about tight ends, I think the conversation has to start with Trey McBride out of Colorado State. This is a guy who decided to come back for the Rams, for a senior season, 6'4", 260 pounds. And this guy, he is their offense. Like Drake London with USC, Trey McBride is the offense there at Colorado State. 86 catches, over 1,000 yards on the year. A versatile weapon, a guy that you're going to line up all over the field, whether he's an inline, in the slot, on the outside. He uses his big body to his advantage. He's going to be a weapon with out-breaking routes, in-breaking routes, up the seam, and then as an inline blocker, you see the physicality with which he plays. He's the most complete tight end in this draft. Is he going to be a first-rounder? Could he sneak in into the first round like Hayden Hurst did? We'll see what he runs at the combine. There's a chance that he could sneak into round 1, but I think there are too many guys that are really clamoring for that first-round slot. I think he'll probably be an early day 2 pick, but I definitely am a big fan of Trey McBride. After that is Jalen Weidermeyer, and really with Weidermeyer, he's not as smooth of an athlete, but he definitely has tremendous size, 6'5", 255 pounds, pretty consistent in terms of his production there with the Aggies, over 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns through the air. Uses that big body, has a really large catch radius. Not as good of a blocker, not as polished as Trey McBride, but definitely a guy who I think is going to come off the board in round 2. And then after that, there are a lot of other guys that we're going to be talking about. I think one of the guys that is going to be polarizing is Jaleel Billingsley. A A lot of people really like him. They have him as a third-round grade. To me, yes, the traits are there. He's very athletic, but I think he's a little undersized at the tight end position. He struggles with his blocking. We'll get into more depth as we go with him. He's 6'4", 230. I think he, if I were to look at Jaleel Billingsley, I'm probably talking about the fourth round range. I like Cole Turner out of Nevada, 6'5", 240 pounds. The junior, excellent size, another guy who plays above the rim, if you will. But you watch a couple of the games, and this is a guy who has tremendously strong hands. He'll box guys out. You'll see him extend for the football and just make these hands catches away from defenders. It's absolutely ridiculous. Isaiah Likely out of Coastal Carolina, I want to see what he runs in the 40. He's one of those guys who definitely will catch your eye. Cade Otton out of Washington, he struggled a little bit this year. The Huskies really getting anything going, but he's one of the more complete tight ends in this year's draft, along with Jeremy Ruckert. Really a pass catcher there for Ohio State. I think everyone thinks he's known for his blocking, but he actually has tremendous hands. And then Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State. He's a bigger guy, 6'6", 257, but definitely a guy who has tremendous hands. Those are all guys who we could see come off the board on day 2, likely a day 3 guy. Some of those guys will be day 3, but we'll get into those conversations a little while later. We get into the offensive line, and the offensive tackle. Number one offensive tackle has to be Evan Neal, 6'7", 340 pounds. He's actually lost about 20 pounds, and a physical freak, very athletic. A guy that when you look at Jacksonville and they top 5 pick, they're going to need an offensive lineman to protect their investment in Trevor Lawrence. And I think if Cam Robinson stays on the roster, you kick him inside the guard, and that left side, you've improved the left side of that line by adding just one player with Evan Neal and Cam Robinson, 2 Alabama Crimson Tide offensive tackles playing on the left side of that line there, protecting a Clemson quarterback. Go figure. But what you love about Evan Neal is he's so physical and powerful in the running game. And just a guy who just blows guys up. You watch him cave in the left side of the line, uses his long arms, those long limbs to his advantage, really keeps the defensive ends at bay, especially in the passing game. When you watch him as a pass protector, that kick slide, gets good depth, very nice knee bender for a guy his size as well. And you watch him with those hands. The punch is absolutely there and very consistent, keeps those hands inside. There are a lot of tackles in this draft who, those hands kind of creep a little bit, but he's one of those guys who definitely keeps them inside and really locks on. I think, Jacksonville feels like the right pick for Evan Neal at this point. You look at Charles Cross out of Mississippi State. I think he's number 2, 6'5", 310, the redshirt sophomore. This is a guy, as a freshman, you saw him as a pass protector, really light on his feet, moved very well, but he's in the Mike Leach offense. So you wonder, is he another Andre Dillard? Is he going to be able to block in the running game? I think that's one of the things that you definitely see. I watched him play against Mississippi, and he struggled a little bit with Sam Williams, especially with some of these counter moves back to the inside. And he'd overset a little bit at times, trying to really get out on those kick slides. And Sam Williams would ultimately beat him back to the inside. That change of direction was a little bit of a step slow, and so you saw him getting beat inside at times. But when he was ready for it, and he wasn't really anticipating where Williams was going to be going, and he kept a little bit more balance to himself, then he was able to make those quick changes of direction and slide and get in front of him. And so he's not taking quite as deep a step or anything like that. He's able to then make those quick moves. And I think Charles Cross, very athletic guy. You just worry about him. How physical can he really be? You want to see him be a consistent finisher, and that's one of the things that we just haven't seen a whole lot of. So I said he was number 2, but I'm going to go ahead and make the move with Ikem Ekwonu. They're out of NC State. 6'3", 325 pounds. The junior, look, we were talking about him as a guard, and if you go to my website right now, readyforthedraft.com, you'll see that I have Ikem Ekwonu as a guard. And it's one of those things, you talk about the lack of overall length. Really, at the end of the day, you look at what Rashawn Slater did with the Chargers. And, undersized, is he going to be a guard? Where is he going to play? the end of the day, the footwork was there, the physicality was there. You saw what he did against Chase Young. He's absolutely left tackle, and the Chargers don't have to worry about the left side, the blind side of Justin Herbert for over a decade because they have their guy. You look at Ikem Ekwonu, he's another Rashawn Williams. Look, Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater fell all the way to 13 to the Chargers, right? Ikem Ekwonu is not coming off the board outside of the top 10 because of what Rashawn Slater did. This is another guy, he's so fluid with his movements, he's explosive, and then he's just so nasty. 63 pancake blocks so far this year, just 1 sack allowed. I think over 150 pancakes in his career. He's just so athletic. He moves so well laterally. Even if he gets beaten, you see that he has that the feet to recover, and the hands. He's so violent. He's nasty. He's always finishing, always looking for that next block. If he's out in space, watch out. He's going to tee off on you as well. So he's definitely a guy, to me, when I look at him, I get so excited watching Ekwonu play. Definitely a fun guy to watch. Nicholas Petit-Ferrer out of Ohio State is another guy, 6'5", 304 pounds. Keep an eye out for him. He's one of those guys, I thought, up and down season at times. There were times where he looked dominant. Michigan game, he struggled, especially with having to deal with Aidan Hutchinson. He'd overset at times and get beaten to the inside. He'd lose some of the hand battles as well. But when you watched him in a lot of the other games, especially against George Karlaftis at the Purdue game, able to anchor on the edge, really dig in and really stoned him. I think really what makes me nervous about Petit-Ferrer right now at this stage in the game is those double moves. Arnold Ebiketie, working to the outside, and then ultimately crosses and gets back to the inside. You watched with Petit-Ferrer against him, and the kick slide was really shallow. Arnold lined up at that wide 9 technique. Second step was wide, and then had this wide base. And Ebiketie goes for this inside move. He was slow to recover because he had such a wide base to himself. Then having to try to plant and slide, and he just wasn't able to do that. Was left lunging and leaning. You didn't see those short, choppy steps that you'd like to see from an offensive tackle, and so that's one of the things that I really worry about with him. Is he going to have that footwork there in the passing game? You watch him with the physicality in the running game. You see some of that, but it's just not consistent enough for me to really put him into that upper echelon. I think really the guy that you want to put up there is that Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa, 6'7", 321 pounds. You want to talk about a guy who's physical, a guy who's going to get nasty. Penning's absolutely going to be that guy. Is he going to be a left tackle at the next level? I'm not so sure, but you see the success of Spencer Brown there with the Bills, and I'm telling you, Trevor Penning, because of that success, he's similar with Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown, really an athletic freak. Trevor Penning is the guy who's going to continue to move up draft boards throughout the draft process. If you get a chance to watch any Northern Iowa tape, tune in, watch Trevor Penning. You'll enjoy what you're watching. You kick inside to guard. Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. Look, this guy's played all over the line for the Aggies, from the left side, the line of tackle to right side tackle. Played inside a guard as well. 6'3", 325. He doesn't have the foot speed to really keep up on the outside. What you really love about him is the physicality with which he plays. Really a nasty dude. And I think in the short area bursts, he really does a really good job walling off some of his defenders. The hand placement right underneath, you definitely love to see that as well. And he plays to the whistle. I think of Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC, the guy who played tackle, did a decent job, but really his home is at guard, and it really kind of solidified that talk that, hey, he's going to be a guard at the next level. And you look at where AVT came off the board. It was number 14 overall to the Jets. I think that's right around the range where we're going to see Kenyon Green come off the board. After him, you look at Jamari Sawyer out of Georgia, very big physical left tackle. He's a nasty dude. And then Darian Kennard out of Kentucky, 6'5", 345. Reminds me a lot of Cody Ford coming out of Oklahoma. Not really a whole lot of buzz on this guy, but I think he definitely has a chance to be a second-round pick because of that nastiness, that physicality. Then you look at Sean Ryan out of UCLA, 6'5", 320, excellent hands, pretty decent movement skills as well. Could he play the tackle position? I worry about him versus the speed. If you kick him inside to guard, I think he definitely has some Pro Bowl potential. I think that's really what that ceiling is going to be for him. And then we move on to the center position and really the pivot. Tyler Linderbaum, is going to be the Remington Award winner. 6'2", 289 out of Iowa. You see the movement skills, the reach blocks, the ability to climb to the second level. He's an Iowa offensive lineman, so you know that you're going to get the physicality out of him as well. Definitely a guy, the lateral quickness, the pulling, his ability to get all the way to the edge to get a block on a defensive end, keeps going down the sideline, gets to the second level to the linebacker as well. He was a Remington finalist last year, first team All Big Ten, All-American, started as a defensive lineman at Iowa in 2018. Really a tremendous athlete in high school. In 2017, took on Tristan Wirfs as a wrestler. And Wirfs got him the first 2 times, but he was able to drive him down for the pin. In their third duel. Definitely a fun guy because he's just so athletic, and when you look at him, he's definitely going to be the next center coming off the board in round number 1. I think that I'm pretty confident about that. We were expecting somebody, whether it was Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson, to come off the board in round 1. Didn't see that happen. They came off the board day 2, but I think there's Linderbaum's pretty much a lock to come off the board in round number 1. So now it's time to transition to the defensive side of the football. When we're talking about the defensive end position, I think the conversation has to start with Kayvon Thibodeaux. They're out of Oregon, 6'5", 258 pounds. This is a guy who wins with speed. You'll see him win with power to the inside, to the outside. Pretty fundamentally sound guy. Motor's always running on every play. Whether it's a run play or a pass play, he doesn't care. He's going to go after the football. I hear a lot of people talk about the lack of pass rush moves, but you'll see him utilize some of that power. He has very heavy hands. He's going to look to try to strike you and drive you back. Saw that in that Utah game. Heavy-handed, delivers this huge strike to the tight end Dalton Kincaid on a run play. Gets back to the inside after he drove the tight end backward and dropped the running back for just a 3-yard gain. That's one of the things that you really love to see. Against Washington, fought through the block of the tight end Cade Otton back to the inside, then bends it to the outside and able to drop the running back for only a gain of 1 yard. So you see that ability to bend even in the running game. But so explosive coming off the edge. So explosive. You see the ankle flexion. You see the ability to dip those hips and bend coming off the edge. Flips those hips in a hurry. Before he's really getting to that corner, those hips are already turned, and really that defensive end, what's he going to do? Really doesn't have a whole lot that he can do. Battled some injuries this year, got injured in that Fresno State game, but look, before he got injured, had a strip sack, really made a difference there in that close fought game. Only beat Fresno State by 7, and really before he got injured, he made a tremendous impact on that game. He'll get fooled a few times on some of the zone reads. Needs to really trust those eyes, but if you think he's a finesse guy, just a speed rusher coming off the edge, you're mistaken. The speed to power, you saw that in the Washington game against the left tackle Jackson Kirkland, able to drive him back. And then, back into the backfield, you saw that time and time again. Heavy-handed to really get Kirkland off balance. Kirkland's really top-heavy. He lacks that lower body strength, so he's really able to get him off balance with some of these really heavy-handed strikes. Really want to see him, not only attack to the outside, but also try to look to win on the inside as well. Get those spin moves. A lot of the up and unders and things like that. Really want to see him take advantage, more of that at the next level. Definitely a physical freak and a guy who, if I'm the Lions, you've been struggling to get any type of a pass rush going. This is going to be your guy that you can really turn loose coming off the edge. I mentioned Aidan Hutchinson, and look, he set the Michigan record for the most sacks in a season with 13 after posting 3 against Ohio State. And look, he's not done yet. Michigan is going on to the Big Ten championship, taking on Wisconsin. And then obviously they'll have the bowl game as well. But look, the speed, the power, driving his man back into the backfield, engages with his hands into the right tackle, and it takes that inside pass to the quarterback to disrupt. I've heard people talk about him not being overly powerful, and to me, I see him driving guys back time and time again. Does he lock out his hips on every single rep? Maybe not, but I'll tell you, this guy, the way that he plays, the passion with which he plays, the fiery nature, a guy who's always working, trying to get to the quarterback, using those hands. You see him extending those arms into the tackle. That's what you saw him, with him against Petit Ferrer. Extended those arms in, and able to rip through, get off that block, flatten out, turn the corner, and get a hit on the quarterback, even if he's not actually sacking the quarterback, he's making those plays. Then he has Petit Ferrer thinking, oversets, quick burst to the inside, chase down the quarterback there as well. So that physicality with his hands, the intelligence to be able to see his man set up to the outside and fire to the inside, the hand usage. Is he on the level of Joey Bosa? Probably not. And you remember Joey Bosa was taken number 3 overall. Nick Bosa, they're number 2 overall to the 49ers. The hands so explosive with the two of them. Is Aidan Hutchinson on par with them in terms of the hand usage? Maybe not quite. But look, he's still a physical freak. Could he run in the 4.6s? It's entirely possible. I see some J.J. Watt in him, to be perfectly honest with you. I've heard some people, I saw one Draftnik online talk about him as potentially an Emmanuel Ogbah, productive at the collegiate level, but can he really be explosive and be a guy at the next level? Look, people talk about David Ojabo being another, Odafe Owe, they were high school teammates. He has 10 sacks, but also 12 and a half total tackles for loss. Can he really play the run? That's the big question that I had for him. When you look at Hutchinson, for me, I think he's not going to be an AJ Epinesa, who really just gets by with his power. I think Hutchinson, he's not as explosive as some of these other guys, and I think that's where everyone talks about those guys have the higher ceiling because they have the traits that Aidan Hutchinson doesn't. But I think while there are guys that could be faster than him, when you look at the passion with which he plays, the technique that he plays with, the hand usage, this is a guy to me, he can play violently when you need him to. And I'm looking at Aidan Hutchinson as a guy who's not getting out of the top 5. He's just not. And I think Houston, if they're looking to try to capture lightning in a bottle a second time there with another type of J.J. Watt player, then you're looking at Aidan Hutchinson as potentially being that guy. George Karlaftis there out of Purdue. Those short arms, he wasn't always getting home there at Purdue, but definitely a guy who can bend the edge and get to the quarterback in a hurry. He's going to be one of those guys that we're going to be talking about. Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State, 6'5", 262, more explosive, bigger guy, definitely someone to keep an eye on. And then Majai Sanders out of Cincinnati, 6'5", 255. Look, the stat line, you're not going to see a ton of sacks, but you're going to see a lot of pressures, a lot of hurries, guys that are still getting to the quarterback, affecting the play. And I'll leave you with this on the defensive ends. You talk about Aidan Hutchinson, 15 quarterback pressures in that game. So even though he had the 3 sacks, those 15 QB pressures, he's affecting the game. And when you talk about guys that you're going to draft in the first round, really in the top 5, you're talking about guys that you have to know where they are on the field at any given time because they are that disruptive, and you have to game plan against them. Aidan Hutchinson, he dominated that game against Ohio State, but look, he's been doing it all season long. Go back and watch the film. It wasn't just one game. Aidan Hutchinson is the real deal. Defensive tackles. I think DeMarvin Leal, he's 6'4", 290. He's been lining up on the outside quite a bit. I think ultimately his home is going to be on the inside, be an interior rusher, a guy that can get up the field. Can he add a little bit of weight to him, get over that 300-pound mark and still be explosive? I think that's the biggest question for him. But I definitely think he's a guy that can come off the board in the first 15, 16 picks. Jordan Davis, good Lord, 6'6", 340 pounds out of Georgia. Here's another guy who is getting Heisman buzz because of his ability to really affect each and every play. He's so massive on the interior there. I mean, you look at number 99, and he just engulfs that entire line. And what's amazing is you see the power, obviously with a guy his size, that power driving a guy off the football, using his hands, but it's the athleticism, it's the ability to make plays in the backfield, chasing down running backs, chasing down quarterbacks. But the thing with it is he does come off the field quite a bit, so he's not always in on some of the passing downs, and that's really the biggest concern that you have is, especially with the weight and everything, is he going to be a guy that you're going to have on the field for 3 downs over and over again? And that's really the biggest concern that I think anybody's going to have. You look at what Dontari Poe was able to do there when he came off the board at number 11. I think that's really where Jordan Davis's ceiling is going to be. He's not going to be a top 10 pick, but I think he's not getting past number 20 overall. And could he come off the board at number 11? Sure. Could he come off the board at number 19 or number 20? Absolutely. But when you watch a big guy run, and I'm expecting him to run really well, I have this feeling that his draft stock is just going to continue to climb as we get further into this draft process. After that, Fedarian Mathis out of Alabama, 6'4", 312, the veteran there for Bama, and you turn on the film and you watching that defensive line, and 48 just continues to flash. Definitely explosive, a guy that likes to get down the field in a hurry. Perion Winfrey out of Oklahoma is another guy to keep an eye out for. When he is on and when he wants to play, this dude, he's so quick getting into the backfield. He jumped off sides, I think, 4 times against Oklahoma State. But this was a guy that for a while, for a time in that game, he was so unblockable. He was firing off the ball, using that speed to power, driving his man into the backfield, and ultimately tackled not only his man but also the running back, and ultimately caused a fumble on that play. Just absolutely explosive. You see him shooting gaps as well, and using that speed to affect the play both against the run and the pass. It's just the consistency, but the traits are absolutely there. And then Haskell Garrett, another guy who's very physical at the point of attack, but also has that quickness, likes to shoot gaps, get into the backfield. I think those guys all are going to be in consideration there in round number 2. Now, when we talk about the outside linebacker position, I think a lot of people have varying opinions there about your outside linebackers. I think Kingsley Enagbare, JJ, as he's known, 6'4", 270 pounds. He's definitely a guy to be excited about. I think the traits that you talk about, they're absolutely there. A guy who's relentless coming off the edge, a guy who can bend for a guy his size. I like his physicality as well. Will McDonald, the 4th. He's 6'4", 245 pounds, redshirt junior there out of Iowa State. Is a guy, he's another guy who wins with his hands, very physical with those hands, and a variety of pass rush moves. You'll see the 2-hand swipe, you'll see the rip. Does whatever he can to get those offensive linemen's hands. He'll chop down on those hands and then be able to bend around the edge. You're looking at a guy who, in the last 2 seasons, racked up 22 sacks and 26 tackles for loss. The biggest concern that I have with him is whether or not he can be a factor in the running game, and be a consistent factor in the running game. But definitely a nose for the football. Look, 7 forced fumbles in those 2 seasons and 3 pass breakups. He's one of those guys that I think, as people continue to study his film, if he does decide to come out, he's somebody who I think could be a sneaky guy to slide into round number 1. Drake Jackson out of USC. Look, Todd Orlando's defense really didn't really utilize him the way that you'd like to see. Look, 6'4", 250 pounds, and the junior, he was asked to drop way too often. Although you did get to see him in their first game against San Jose State. He gets into the passing lane, was able to bend back and ultimately make a play on the football and pick off a pass. 25 tackles for loss and 12 and a half sacks. You're expecting to see more explosiveness from him coming off the edge this year, but it's really because he wasn't always asked to be that pass rusher. When when Dante Williams took over as the head coach after Clay Helton was fired, the first thing you started seeing him do more often was come off the edge, bend around, and when you saw that, you saw the explosiveness, you saw that quick get off, you saw his ability to use his hands. It's one of the things that USC defensive linemen and edge rushers, they work their hands really well, and then flattening out to the quarterback and making his presence felt in the backfield. So even though the production wasn't necessarily there, the other thing that you worry about, he battles some injuries, during his time there at USC, but the traits are absolutely there to be a first-round pick, and he's a guy that, you could definitely get excited about. There's one guy that I did leave out up on the defensive line, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him because he's a guy who I think could end up making his way into the top 10, and that's Travon Walker out of Georgia. Look, turn on the film of Georgia, and we're talking about number 99, but number 44 is pretty darn good himself. 6'5", 275 pounds. This is a dude, he does a great job stacking and shedding the tackle and dropping running backs in the backfield. Just his ability to bend coming off the edge, the physicality with which he plays. You watch the bull rush. If you turn on that Missouri game, bull rush on the left guard, gets his hands into the chest of the guard, drives him all the way back, dumps him, comes off that block, and ends up getting a sack of I believe it was Basilak was the quarterback in that game. And just so physical with his hands. He's a big, not only a big physical presence, but a dude who does a really good job bending, coming off the edge. And one of the things that I thought was really impressive, you watched him in that Auburn game. It was a third down play. Bo Nix running to the perimeter on the right side on a rollout. Walker able to get outside the blockers, comes downhill, couldn't drop Nix, who wound up throwing the football away. But what you watched there was his ability, that athleticism to get outside and affect the passer who was out on the run. And he's able to play the defensive end. He's able to move inside as a 3 technique. The versatility that you saw with him. He's another guy, to me, that's going to be a first rounder. The question is just how high is his draft stock going to move. He can end up moving his way into the top 10 when it's all said and done. Inside linebackers now, Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd, they're going to be competing to be that number 1 linebacker taken in this draft. Nakobe Dean's the best blitzer in this draft, bar none. 6 foot, 225 pounds. Little undersized, will struggle to get off blocks at times, but a guy who plays sideline to sideline, does a great job coming off the edge, times his blitz as well, coming downhill as well. Devin Lloyd, though, he's 6'3", 235 pounds, a guy who is really explosive, and I'll tell you what, keep an eye on him, because if he runs that 40 time, if he can end up getting into that 4.5 range, then you're talking about a guy with his size. He'll end up creeping up even higher into that draft. Is he going to be a top 10 pick? I don't quite see that, but I definitely think he's going to come off the board anywhere between 11 and 20, and it really just depends on just how quick he's running. But look, 245 tackles on the year, 43 tackles for loss, so he's getting into the backfield, 22 tackles for loss. In 2021 with 100 tackles, 7 sacks on the year as well, 3 interceptions, 6 pass breakups, and a partridge in a pear tree. This dude does it all. It's really impressive to watch Devin Lloyd work. He does a great job working through traffic, gets off blocks, uses his length to his advantage, uses the speed coming off the edge. He actually put his hand in the ground and was an edge rusher coming off the edge and showed his ability to bend and get after the quarterback. His ability to drop into coverage. He does actually a pretty good job in his back pedal, stays low, and then you see that transition. No real wasted movement. Trusts his eyes really well. He will get a little bit overly aggressive at times, but man, this is a guy you're going to see him scrape over the top on run plays and come downhill and drop running backs on the edge and on one play, and then you're going to see him drop into coverage and pick off a football on the next. Really a lot of fun to watch. If you get a chance to watch Utah at all, especially in that Pac-12 championship against Oregon, watch out for number 0. He's going to be all over the field. After that, those 2 guys at the top, Christian Harris out of Alabama, he's kind of had an up and down season to me. I think he's a guy who plays very well, coming straight ahead. But if you're asking him to play laterally, that's where I think he gets himself into trouble. I think he struggles against the pass. I'll give you a name of a guy that I'm really a big fan of, and that's Mike Rose out of Iowa State. 6'4", 245. just a nose for the football, a tackling machine, and battled some stinger issues this year, so he wasn't playing up to his normal self. But a guy that just racks up tackles. I think 3 years over 100 tackles. He and then DeMarvion Overshone. With DeMarvion Overshone, he's more of an undersized linebacker. He's 6'4", 223, but the athleticism and his ability to do a little bit of everything, kind of like a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. That's kind of who I compare him to a little bit. He's kind of a bigger version of JOK, but definitely a guy that can make plays on the outside. And then you have to be excited about this cornerback class, right? You have to be, right? You have Derek Stingley out of LSU. Everyone knows about this kid. Bursts onto the scene as a true freshman in that national title season there for LSU. And Stingley, that's really where he made a name for himself. 6'1", 195 pounds. Ended up with 6 interceptions, 15 pass breakups. You watch the physicality, that he likes to play with. He'll like to jam you at the line at times. The effortless with the transitions. A guy who has tremendous ball skills. He's going to attack the football in the air. But look, teams started getting smart at times. They would look to try to attack his side and try to throw the football at him. And it really didn't work very well on a lot of those plays. He's very fast twitch, coming downhill. A guy who makes breaks on the ball really quickly, gets his hand in, and makes plays on the football. I think if there's really anything that he struggles with, it's really with that physicality in the ground game, and being able to wrap up. I think that's one of the things that you saw, especially if you watch that UCLA game. He'd have, I think it was Kyle Phillips, ran a crossing route underneath, catch and run to the perimeter, got to the sideline, spun out of Stingley's tackle, ended up going into the end zone for a touchdown, and really just battled a foot injury that he aggravated. So really the big question that I have with him is, teams kind of shied away from him at times, and when they did go at him, they found some success. But you wonder, what are you really looking at with this guy? Is he going to stay healthy at the next level? Allowed receptions on only 40% of off targets the last 2 seasons. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly where Derek Stingley comes off the board. I think in terms of the traits, the athleticism, the ball skills, the physicality, on those routes. He's one of those guys that I think is in line for a potential top 5 pick. You look at, you just worry because you look at, Denzel Ward has battled some injuries. Jeffrey Okudah battled some injuries. And so you see Derek Stingley, he hasn't even played it down in the NFL yet. He's already battling some injuries. So you wonder, if he can stay healthy. And if he can, then that's really where you're going to see his game elevate and take things to the next level. That's really what I believe with him. Ahmad Gardner, Sauce Gardner, he's 6'3", 200 pounds, the junior. I love this guy, because the long limbs. He's so physical. You watch him against SMU, really jamming the receivers off the line. After playing bump and run coverage, does a good job rerouting the receiver. Runs stride for stride with Reggie Roberson all the way across the field. The wide receiver sat down as the quarterback was rolling out to the right, positions himself with outside leverage, making the throw really difficult for the quarterback. And ultimately the quarterback decided he'd throw the football down the field and it was incomplete. Didn't even want to mess with Sauce Gardner at that point. But not only are you going to see him get up on the line of scrimmage, but he's also going to use bail technique so he can keep his eyes on the quarterback, knowing where the football is going to go. And look, if you're staring down your receiver, if he gives him any inkling that the ball's coming his way, he's going to drive on the football and he's going to use those long arms to make a play. The ball skills are ridiculous for this guy as well. And that's really why, you watch a guy like Kobe Bryant had such a big year because teams wanted to throw away from number 1. And then they learned that Kobe Bryant is a guy who has an outside shot at a first-round pick, likely going to be a second-rounder, has incredible length as well, physicality. These are 2 guys, when you talk about Cincinnati, you're talking about a group of 5 team. This is a Power 5 secondary. Brian Cook, the safety, one of your underrated safeties there. Another guy who's really a lot of fun to watch. They're going to try to find maybe Javon Hicks. Maybe they'll find Arquan Bush in that passing game because they want to stay away from these Bearcat corners at all costs. So Ahmad Gardner to me is the number 2 guy, very savvy corner. You'll see him use his hands. He may give a little tug on the jersey, but it's not really anything that's going to impede the receiver, just enough to allow him to make up ground and get a hand in to make a play. Very, very savvy corner as well. The instincts are off the charts. Roger McCreary there for Auburn, 6 foot, 190 pounds. A physical lockdown corner there for Auburn. He'll be a first rounder. Same with Kayir Elam. They're out of Florida, 6'2", 193, tremendous length. A guy that can lock down on the outside. And Andrew Booth out of Clemson. I think he's number 5 on my list, 6 foot, 200. Another guy, I haven't done as much study on the corners as I'd like. So, in terms of the overall analysis, I know it probably sucks in comparison to looking at some of the other positions. But I really need to get in and take a better look at these guys and really study, not only what they do in the passing game. You want to see, can they play up on the line of scrimmage? What do they do in off coverage? Can they do both? Bail technique. Do they get caught with their eyes in the backfield? Are they susceptible to double moves? How aggressive are they? Can they stay in their back pedal? Stay low. What about their transitions? Are they stiff in the hips? Can they turn and run? Those are a lot of things that obviously you're going to be keeping an eye on. And so I want to do a better job with these guys. So the corners, as we go forward, I promise I'll do a better job taking a look at the cornerbacks. We look at the safeties. Kyle Hamilton, we know that this guy's a special player, 6'3", 219 pounds. And you look at the junior, you look at Derwin James and what he's meant to the Chargers. And I think Kyle Hamilton is a guy, he's going to be a top 10 pick. He could be a top 5 pick. I think 91 was the last time we saw a safety come off the board in the top 5. But Kyle Hamilton can do it all. This is a guy who's going to play in the box right around the line of scrimmage, a guy who has tremendous range coming over the top. The ground that he covers to be able to get from the middle of the field to the sideline, especially to pick off a couple of passes early on in the season, it's special. And so, Hamilton, I know he went down to an injury during the season, but he's one of those playmakers that you have to have on your roster. I think number 2 on the list for me is Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State, a guy who I think can cover a little bit in the slot. Hamilton can as well. And what's surprising about both of them is you don't really see the stiffness in the hips. And I think that's really what you're talking about with safeties. How fluid of an athlete are they going to be? And those are the guys that are going to end up coming off the board earlier. With Brisker, another guy who's very physical in the box, plays well over the top, instinctive, makes big plays at big moments in the game. Daxton Hill out of Michigan, a guy that lined up in the slot quite a bit. He's another guy who's going to be kind of next on the board. Brandon Joseph out of Northwestern, I think the ball skills are there. I think what you're going to find with him is, he's more of a finesse guy, not really all that physical. Lewis Seen out of Georgia, he's the guy I think that's going to move up draft boards. He's 6 foot, 195 pounds, the junior. You see him, he's known for some of the big hits. I think for me, the first thing that I think of with him was the big hit on Kyle Pitts that ultimately got a targeting call that knocked Kyle Pitts out of action for a couple of games. And so the physicality's always been there, but he plays well in the run, and you watch him now, the ball skills are really being developed. He's one of those guys who I think is going to be a high riser in terms of the draft. And then you look at Jalen Petrie, a guy who, especially in the zone reads, coming downhill, blowing those up. He does a great job just flying downhill into the backfield. He'll get out of control at times, so he is susceptible to some missed tackles. Both he and Jalen Catalon there out of Arkansas. Catalon's a little undersized. He's 5'9", 189 pounds. But I think both of those guys are names to get to know. And then Verone McKinley, they're out of Oregon, 5'11", 194 pounds. I think the ball skills are absolutely there. He gets himself out of position at times, especially in the running game. But he's definitely a playmaker. He and Michael Wright, the corner, are 2 guys who could come off the board on day 2 for the Ducks. So those are the guys that I'm looking at and really targeting at the top end of the draft. And we're going to be talking about some of the sleepers as we move forward. I mentioned a few of them. And really, you can stay with Cincinnati and just talk about a bunch of those guys. From Darian Beavers there at outside linebacker to Kobe Bryant, the corner. But are they really sleepers at this point? I don't know that they are. I think the world is really starting to get to know them a lot more, and that they are the playmakers that we expect them to be. And there are going to be some names. Kentucky's Josh Paschal. Nobody's really talking about him. They've kind of looked at some of these bigger names, but Pascal's a guy that he wreaks havoc and plays in the backfield. Definitely a guy to be on the lookout for. So we'll get in and talk about some of these guys as we move forward over the next week. And at that point, we'll be able to then get into bowl season, talk about each and every one of the bowl matchups, talk about some of the guys to really be on the lookout for, in terms of the draft process. Every bowl game, there's got to be at least one guy that we're targeting for the draft, someone that you should be paying attention to. So, hey, you know what? You turn it into a bowl game, on a Tuesday or a Wednesday because you have nothing else to do. You want to watch that bowl game. It may not even be a team that you're interested in. We'll at least have a name or two on each side, of the field that you'll be able to keep an eye out for. That'll be making plays, and guys that you'll need to know as we get into the pre-draft process, as we watch some of the all-star games, and we get into the combine and the individual workouts. These names are going to start swirling, and look, you're going to see 200-300 guys there at the combine, and there are other workouts that are going to be done now. We have the HBCU with their workouts. So there are going to be a lot of different names that are going to be floated around. And as we get into the bowl season, I want to make sure that each and every bowl game, there's at least one guy on each team that you should be looking out for. So we'll make sure that we bring that to you as well. So I think it's time to go ahead and bring this podcast to an end. It's been great bringing some content to you. I've got plenty more in store for the weeks and months ahead. Stay tuned, and for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your week. What's going to happen next in this coaching carousel, this whole crazy college football scene? I'm sure next week there will probably be a couple more moves that we'll be talking about as well. So take care, everyone. Enjoy the week. Enjoy the conference championships, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everyone, and I am out of here.